Next up, we have our film critics here with us in the studio, which means it's time now for Movie Spotlight, our weekly segment reviewing some of the latest releases at the Korean box office and online. So let's bring in our esteemed critics now. First, we have Jason bechervaise. Jason, hello, it's good to see you.
Hello, James. It's great to be here, as always.
And we have Darcy Paquet with us as well. Hello to you too, Darcy.
Hi.
So 2 local films this week, and we kick things off with a historical drama that is turning into a major box office hit here in Korea, which is welcome news, of course, because as we've talked on the show recently, it's become a bit of a rarity in today's market. The English title is 12/12 The Day. In Korean, it's called Seoul의 봄, which I guess can be translated into the Spring of Seoul. It's based on real events, the military coup led by General Chun Doo-hwan in 1979, December 12th, or 12/12. Jason, what more can you tell us?
Yeah, this is a period of history many of our listeners will, of course, be aware of. It had a lasting impact on Korea's contemporary history. There's actually depicted in a whole number of Korean films set in the 80s, Taxi Driver, 1987, When the Day Comes, The Attorney, and others. The coup itself is sparked off by the assassination of Park Chung-hee in October 1979, which is where the events in the film kick off. So General Chun Doo-hwan, played by Hwang Jung-min, is tasked with investigating the shooting of the president, but he uses this as an opportunity to further consolidate his power within the government and military, and meanwhile the army chief of staff, he's played by Lee Sung-min. He asks Lee Tae-shin, played by Jung Ho-sung, to lead the capital garrison. Essentially, this is the army that defends Seoul in an attempt to prevent Chun from taking control of the whole military and staging a successful coup. And so essentially there are all these characters, but it focuses on the general and this commander and how one exploits a power vacuum while the other seeks to defend his country from not from the threat of North Korea, but from within his own military ranks. So it's directed by Kim Sung-soo, who's brought us a few films, including Beat, starring, of course, Jung Ho-sung. And he co-wrote the script with 3 others, so quite a few involved in the script, which actually is evident because there's so much going on, so many characters, kind of like 1987. But it's actually really quite focused. So I think that's testament to the director and of course the script writers.
Interesting. Yes, there's been a lot of buzz about this film, but Darcy, it sounds like quite a heavy film as well. And we essentially know the ending, of course. Does that diminish its impact? So what do you think of it?
So I was talking about this with somebody just recently, the fact that you go into this film knowing exactly how it's going to end. And yet, the film catches you up so much in the moment that you end up kind of suspending your disbelief and, thinking that there is a way that they can kind of prevent this from happening. And, it shows you in such detail, and then you see all of these possible ways that, it could have been stopped. And, when you just kind of read about the results in history books, it can seem like it was something kind of inevitable and what the movie shows in great detail is that actually, if just a few more people had kind of demonstrated more courage in this moment, that they could have stopped this from happening and then changed the course of Korean history. And so, the experience of watching it is extremely intense. A lot of people come out of it just kind of boiling over with frustration and emotion.
I hear there's even people playing almost sort of game where they monitor their heart rate during the film on their smartwatches, just because it is so intense, and to see the results and posting those results on social media. Yeah,
the closest comparison I can make is kind of going back to Memories of Murder, in that we knew how it ended, and yet as you watch the film, you become so absorbed in it. You think they're going to catch this killer who obviously was never caught. And in here too, like it just, you can see kind of the alternate history.
So it works then as a tense drama?
Yeah, I was really impressed with it because, clearly Kim Sung-soo has a long career. He has made a lot of successful films. His most recent film, Asorat, is a favorite of some film critics, but it's a very chaotic movie. Like, the energy is just all over the place. And it's, you know, I mean, you can count that as a strength, I guess, but if you're less generous, you could say it's a bit of a mess in terms of its organization. But this movie is so focused and so...
It is, yep.
I mean, everything builds off of each other and all the pieces fit into together. And so it's just, I was not expecting this kind of film from this director, I don't know, it was a really great surprise to come across this film.
Jason, what do you think of it? You mentioned some other films that have tackled this part of Korean history, like A Taxi Driver. How does this compare?
Yeah, it's interesting because The Taxi Driver and The Attorney, both, of course, you know, very commercial films and also very sentimental. I mean, Song Kang-ho in both those films really carries them, and you know, melodrama features so heavily in Korean films since, you know, the early 20th century. And I think what's different here is because I think it does in a sense humanize the events, but it does so in a way which I think is really quite refreshing, and it does infuriate viewers, but it focuses on decisions, you know, the choices they make. So if you compare it to a film, actually you mentioned Memories of Murder, Darcy, where you've got the police detectives in that movie where they're not really equipped with the skill set to find or track down the serial killer, so they're prevented from doing so. And whereas here in this movie, the characters have agency, and it's the decisions they make that then affect history. So in that sense, for me, I thought it was very innovative, and I thought it was continue this trend in kind of humanizing, you know, events in Korean history, but it did it in a different way.
I understand there's been a lot of attention about Hwang Jung-min's depiction of General Chun as well, right? I understand that he puts on quite a performance. Yeah,
4 hours of makeup, right, before each, filming day. But yeah, I mean, what I liked about him, I've always admired Hwang Jung-min, but he doesn't overcook it. And actually, there are these moments in the film, like there's this moment towards the end of the film where he realizes what he's done, and he's human, right? So he could have just come across, and he is conniving, he is villainous, he does make you really angry, but at the same time he feels familiar, which is kind of scary. So I think he absolutely nailed it, and superb acting. The only criticism I do have is the music. I thought the music was a bit too heavy-handed, but that is a minor criticism. Actually, it was a very well accomplished film, and it's doing so well, and I think that's down to the fact that it's just connecting with audiences.
It is interesting, Darcy, that it is doing so well, right? It is a welcome development indeed for the industry that's really struggling at the moment.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it reminds us kind of what the film industry used to be like before the pandemic. No, but it has been a long time since, you know, so many people have been talking about a particular film.
Yeah.
And, you know, we have this moment now where, you know, if you want to kind of be up to date with what is going on in Korean society, you need to watch this film.
Right, yeah. It's one of those films, definitely.
Yeah, and so that's the kind of film that ultimately pushes past 10 million admissions. And you know, the other thing about moviegoing is that I think before the pandemic, I kind of discounted how important momentum is, but you need kind of a series of films that bring people to the box office. And then once you get that momentum and people get the habit of going to the theater, then, you know, it can kind of continue on and benefit subsequent films. And there hasn't really been a film, I mean, there has been the Roundup, but it feels like a special case.
Right.
Where, I mean, since the pandemic, there hasn't been a film to kind of rebuild that momentum. And so even decent films haven't been doing very well in the box office. And, you know, one film's not going to fix
of course,
the current problems of the film industry, but it is really encouraging to see.
It's a glimmer of hope.
Why do you think is this film that has connected the audiences here so well this year?
Well, I think it goes back to the point that I made earlier, is that, you know, you're sitting there watching this film, it infuriates you. So I guess you're educating yourself. Certainly, you know, younger audiences who weren't around at the time, they're learning about the history, but it's also, you know, it's done in a way that's relatable, because you're watching it and you're infuriated with the people, with the decisions that these characters are making. Yeah. Well, certainly most of them anyway, most of the characters in the film. And I think it's just really well accomplished film. I've mentioned the acting. You know, it was an expensive film to produce. I think the break-even point is 4.6 million admissions, which is pretty high. It will sail past that. And so Yeah, I think it's a film that everyone's talking about, and it's different. It is different because you don't just have this one character. You know, as much as I love Song Kang-ho, I love him, but it's not this film where you sit there and cry and feel very, you know, emotional about a period of history. This kind of is emotional in a different way. But it just connects, and I'm really happy that it's doing so.
It's just a good film. That's
it is. I mean, it is. I mean,
Okay.
that's a compliment way of saying it. I'm a critic, so that's what I do. But yeah,
Well,
it's a good movie.
It's good to hear that a film is doing so well. It's called 12/12 The Day, or Seoul in Korean. It's out now in Korean theatres. Let's swiftly move on to something a little less serious. We have a rom-com called Single in Seoul. It has the same transliterated name in Korean. It features Soo-jung and Dong-wook and Darcy. It's the second film today with Seoul in the title, in the original Korean title anyway.
That's right. So, kind of a different view of the Korean capital, a much darker view in the earlier film. I mean, this one, it focuses on the publishing industry, and, you know, which is one of the, it's an industry that I think people in the film industry can relate to, because you know, it's kind of tough to find readers, and, you know, you're doing something creative, but you're sometimes struggling to meet an audience. The main character, played by Soo-jung, is an editor at this publishing company, and actually a lot of it takes place in Paju, because that's where the company is. But you know, she contacts, or her boss contacts, this popular instructor and influencer played by Lee Jung-wook, who lives in Seoul, and who is very upfront about how much he enjoys being single and living in Seoul, and kind of arguing, you know, for the single life, and on Instagram and everything else. And so they have this project together where they're going to publish 2 books together. One of them's Single in Seoul, one of them's Single in Barcelona, and they'll be by 2 different authors. And so it begins just fairly simply, and in a fairly predictable way, because
Very predictable way.
You know, we have these characters that have kind of extreme tendencies, and you kind of know that you know, the very kind of cold and unfeeling and, you know, aloof single character, that, you know, his heart will warm up in the course of the movie. And so it's sort of halfway through where things start to get, I think, more interesting. And, you know, there is a twist that I won't talk about. And yeah, so the second half's a bit different from the first, but that's the basic setup.
Okay, so it sounds rather familiar. We don't have a lot of time. A quick 1-minute review each, Jason?
I think, the first few minutes I found a bit of a drag. That's a bit of an understatement, but yeah, it struggles to get going. But there is a character that comes in a little bit later, and she certainly ignites the story. I wish they kind of reversed the roles. I wish Soo-jung was this person who really wants to be single in Seoul, but alas, I like Soo-jung. I don't think she's particularly great in here. But what I would say, I think it's interesting how the streaming industry is affecting cinema. So this film comes across like a bit of a TV drama. I mean, it's really kind of tame in some ways, and the thing is, with a film like Concrete Utopia, that's a really dark film, but I think, you know, it's kind of following this trend of dystopian content, whereas this is kind of, you know, a different genre, but it's certainly a genre that's doing very well on streaming platforms like Netflix. And so it does come across to me, at least in its aesthetic, that it's, you know, it is somewhat kind of very streaming-esque. I recently rewatched the film Marriage is a Crazy Thing. This is a film directed by Yuha, which features these 2 characters who actually don't really want to get married. They're happy being single, but, you know, they want to be in relationships. Whereas this film, it does deal with some similar themes, but it's just done in a very kind of different, kind of less extreme way, which I think ultimately makes it less interesting. But so yeah, it's okay. But I wouldn't rave about it. Certainly, the better film is our first film.
Okay, okay, but not great. Darcy.
Yeah, maybe I liked it a little bit better than Jason. I think that it feels like it's pitched more at kind of people in their 30s than people in their 20s.
Millennials. Yeah.
And I liked some of the details of the films, and, you know, the characters. It didn't feel like, again, by the time we get to the second half of the movie, the characters felt more natural, and I was kind of more interested in them. I was interested in the fact that, you know, I was watching this in a theater with a fair number of people, and when the film ended, nobody got up from their seat, and they stayed through 2/3 of the way through the credits, and nobody got up. And
that's true of mine as well. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. So it might have been partly the music that was playing in the credits, but I think also the film is the kind of film that, it did leave enough of an impression on them that they wanted to kind of sit and think about it for a second.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. I mean, the second half of the film is definitely the better half, and actually that's where it certainly gets more interesting. So it's not a bad film. I'm not saying it's a bad movie at all. It's a 3-star movie. 3-star.
Okay. So that was a single in Seoul, and that's our segment for this week. Jason, Darcy, thank you as always, and we'll see you next time.
Okay. Have a great weekend.
Take care.